By Baroness Tina Stowell. And Tina, you're a former leader of the House of Lords, but you're a former holder of the Privy Seal, the Lord Privy Seal. Now, we just spoke to our historian, and there are all these grand titles and all these things that happen in places like the House of Lords that most of the country, frankly, hasn't really heard of, but we are learning this week again about the British Constitution, about the system that was developed back in 1688 and which has served this country remarkably. And as Lord Privy Seal, I mean, you were sort of the fifth highest office holder in the entirety of the United Kingdom.
Well, yeah, you have to draw a distinction between a great officer of state and the great officers. But yes, it was. The Lord Privy Seal is the...
So tell us what the Lord Privy Seal does, please.
Well, the Lord Privy Seal is a historic role, and in the past what it did was the keeper of the seal of private correspondence from the monarch. So any communication from the monarch, in order for it to be authorised and to be seen to be real, had to have the imprint of the Privy Seal, Privy being, you know, the sort of word for private. These days, it is purely a ceremonial role, and it is usually attached to a cabinet position. It doesn't have to be the leader of the House of Lords, but it's more often than not, it's the leader of the House of Lords. And you will have seen on Saturday the Lord President of the Council, who is currently the leader of the House of Commons and is Penny Mordaunt. And what the Lord Privy Seal does is one of the most frequent attendees of Privy Council meetings. And in the House of Lords, I mean, one of the things that the Lord Privy Seal does is on state opening, carries the cap of maintenance in front of Her Majesty as she processes from the robing room into the chamber.
And it may be ceremonial, as you say, and you're downplaying it, but actually it is an important part of what we've been doing in this country, as I say, since 1688. It's our system.
Absolutely, and I think it's, you know, all of these things, you can argue, well, why do we still need these things? But they are important. There are important symbols of continuity. We've talked a lot about the last few days about how the Queen is representing constancy, but actually it's continuity which brings the stability of our nation.
This is the point.
And these roles, where it's the Air Marshal, I heard your last guest refer to, or the Lord Chamberlain, all of these positions have been around for centuries. And whilst the responsibilities that are attached to these roles have changed over the decades and the years that have gone by, the fact that they're still there and they're a still important part of our constitution is important.
No, I agree with you. I agree with that. We see the crowds now waiting in front of Buckingham Palace, and I'm assuming that the hearse cannot be very far away. No, I mean, the alternative, of course, to all this colour and all this tradition is some very dreary republic where we have a former politician from the Conservative or Labour Party who's president, and that's why I think the monarchy is so strong. It's also interesting, Tina, isn't it, that around the rest of Europe, many of their monarchies have been completely downgraded to the point where they almost have no status at all. And all these events that are taking place here, such as, and I had Nigel Dodds in the chair a moment ago, but such as the King addressing the joint houses, the rest of the world's looking on.
Yeah, I mean, it projects our authority.
I think so.
You know, as we may be a small nation state, but we have real authority, and this is, you know, this is part of what it is. The other thing that struck me this last few days, I mean, we talk about the fact we don't have a written constitution in our country. What we do is we demonstrate our constitution. You know, you get to see our constitution in action, and it's living and breathing quite literally.
Yes, and it's completely unique. And you wouldn't design it on a piece of paper, but it evolved through a civil war and a glorious revolution. And I mean, the way that I put it, it's our way. This is how we've done things, and I have to say I rather like it. And I think the more the great British public see of it, the more they like it. Given your role, particularly on the Privy Council, you clearly, you know, saw the Queen up close, working, and she was a very, very well-read, well-researched, diligent woman, wasn't she? Very much so, very much so. I mean, it was mesmerising to be in the same room as her, I always used to feel. I mean, she fascinates, she's just a fascinating person. And, but
strangely normal at the same time sometimes, you know, to be able to sort of see this real human being, but, you know, such an important, famous figure. But yes, she had always meticulously prepared for everything, whether it's from a small audience welcoming somebody into a new position, and having done her homework, knowing about that person so she could talk to them about their background, or whether it was in a Privy Council and all of the different matters at hand. And you saw on Saturday in the accession ceremony, there's not a lot of discussion in these meetings. They are quite brisk and don't, you know, doesn't require a lot of debate. But it was always clear that there was nothing that was before Her Majesty that she hadn't already been briefed on, and was satisfied that in giving her approval, she knew exactly what she was giving her approval for.
And of course, the interesting thing is this includes not just the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but the other realms as well. A lot of work and responsibility with those too.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and she was somebody who you know, was incredibly well informed. I mean, I used to find you know, I almost didn't want to sort of engage in conversation with her, because I wouldn't want to show my ignorance. You know, he was sort of, you know, he was almost sort of fearful that,
not you, of all
but this
people.
is somebody who, you know, was so knowledgeable that there was no topic that she didn't know about. And she was, you know, incredibly well respected and well regarded, as we know, you know, all around the world.
Oh, goodness me. And, you know, I mean, clearly, you know, I had this completely wrong, because when we had speculation, I heard speculation about, you know, her lack of mobility and what her health might be. And I said to everybody, complete rubbish. She's clearly going to go on for year after year after year. I got it into my head that she was somehow immortal. I don't think I was alone in thinking
I felt
that.
the same, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you feel when you heard the news?
I was genuinely shocked, you know, for that very reason, as you say, that I couldn't imagine life without her. I also thought, as much as we knew that she was frail, that somehow, you know, she was still very much present amongst us. You know, she wasn't frail to the point that, you know, we thought of her as a, you know, she hadn't become a bedridden old lady.
48 hours before, she was saying goodbye to Boris Johnson.
Exactly.
And welcoming Liz Truss.
Exactly. So I think we all thought she was going to go on forever. And I think there was a part of me as well that was a little bit fearful of her passing, because, you know, I felt that this was going to be such a seismic event and so disruptive and unsettling for us as a, you know, as a people and as a nation. And I think one of the most magnificent things of the last few days has been the way that people have clearly been very saddened by the Queen's death, but are so ready to embrace our new king and want him to do well.
Yes.
You know, because him doing well is about us doing well.
Well, it's how the world sees us.
Yeah.
I mean, the Queen wasn't just the most famous person in the world. When people thought of this country, she was probably the first person that they actually thought of.
Yeah.
You know. Well, I must say, Baroness Stowell, thank you for coming in and explaining what the Lord Privy Seal is. And I bet there are lots of people watching this and listening to this quite jealous of you, really, that you got to know the Queen and see the Queen.
Well, I was very privileged.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed for coming in and sharing that experience with us.